Alright, what's up guys? New deck profile today. Neo-Spacians, a deck that is significantly better in Master Rule 5. You've got a lot of cards in this deck. Cards like Next. Cards that are basically, they lock themselves into a fusion monster for the rest of the turn. Now the problem was in Master Rule 4, whenever that happened, you summon that one fusion monster, you couldn't link it away, you couldn't get rid of it. It was stuck in that main monster zone, and you basically, whenever it said you can only special summon fusion monsters for the rest of the turn, it basically locked you into just fusion monsters, because you couldn't summon in any other spot, and that was a little bit annoying. But that restriction is now off, and we can summon fusion monsters wherever we please. And I think Neo-Spacians actually be a really, it's going to be a lot better of a deck than it was before. There's still a little more support that we're waiting to come out, but I actually think this deck is actually very viable now, especially going second with all the crazy effects it has. But let's get started. You play 2 copies of Elemental Hero Neos, original Neos. Nothing more to say, you know, one of Jaden's big monsters. But basically, yeah, you need him to make most of your big fusions. I mean, all of your big fusions, more or less. But yeah, you get him in the graveyard real quick. He's good for various reasons. Next up, you play 1 copy of Rainbow Dragon and 1 copy of Rainbow Dark Dragon. You basically, these are the 2 garnets you play just to special summon Rainbow Neos. You send them off of Neos Fusion. They're like the original LP and Pisty. Play the 2 different ones. You're never going to summon either of them anyway. But, you know, they look pretty cool there. Then we play 3 copies of Elemental Hero Prisma. Basically, this card allows you to copy a name in your extra deck, which is incredibly useful. And yeah, just you reveal the monster in your extra deck, and then send one of the materials to the graveyard, and then this becomes that material on the field. Incredibly useful for various plays. You know, kind of contact summoning and various other things like that. But yeah, definitely a very useful card. Next, we play 3 copies of Neo Space Connector. This card is GOAT. It's insane. It's really good. So basically, on normal summon, you get to special summon a Neo-Spacian or Elemental Hero Neos from your deck. Already pretty good. And then on top of that, you get to tribute this card in order to special summon a Neo-Spacian from the graveyard or an Elemental Hero Neos from the graveyard. So 2 just incredible effects. Really fixes a lot of problems with the deck. The deck doesn't have a great time of getting monsters onto the field, and a card like this just fixes a lot of those issues. But definitely very good. 2 copies of Air Hummingbird. Use it mostly for the name, but you know what? This lets you gain life points. It can help. It can definitely help out in certain situations. 2 copies of Aqua Dolphin. Same thing. Mostly we use it for the name, but it can destroy hand traps in your opponent's hand, which is pretty good, and it lets you do all your other plays. 2 copies of Neo Dark Panther, same thing. Neo-Spacian Dark Panther, same thing. Most of the time you're using it for example, just as a name, but the good thing about this card's effect is that it can copy your opponent's monster effect. And the reason that's so good is because sometimes they'll have an Omni Negate, so you can summon him, copy your opponent's effect. Like, let's say you summon him, bait out your opponent's effect, and then activate this, copy their effect, and now you have an Omni Negate. It's just really good for that. Something like Dawn Dragster, for example, you just copy, and now you can stop their spawn trap cards. 2 copies of Neo-Spacian Grand Mole, one of the greatest, probably the greatest Neo-Spacian of all time. Used to be on the ban list. Used to be on the limited for a very long time, but now he's free to go. I'm going to play him at 2 because he's mostly a name now. You don't really need him, you know, during battle phase, but, you know, it comes up occasionally. 3 copies of Keeper of Dragon Magic. Now this card's very good. It searches a fusion spell. You summon him, you discard a card, and you search a fusion spell, which is going to be our Neos Fusion, which is just, it works out perfectly because that's one of the best cards in our deck. And then the second effect is that you can reveal a fusion monster in your extra deck, and then you can summon from your graveyard one of the materials in face down defense position, which is again pretty useful. The only issue is, you know, you can't really fuse it away unless you have like Convergent Contact or something. Not Convergent Contact, unless you have like Miracle Contact or something. You can't really use them. But it's still, like, you know, it's like a free card back here and there. It's got its uses. Alright, next we play 3 copies of Neos Fusion. This card is insane. It lets you fusion summon from your extra deck using, it has to be a 2 material monster, so it can't be one of the really big Neos fusions, but it can be one of the small ones like Rainbow Neos. Basically, it lets you fusion summon by using cards from your field and from your hand and from your deck. You just send them to the graveyard, and that obviously facilitating your graveyard is incredibly important in this deck. It helps a lot of other things. And then for the rest of the turn, you can't special summon, but it is for the rest of the turn, so this is the last card you want to activate. And it actually works really well with one of the newer cards, which is Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. And the reason it works so well with this is because when this card uses its effect, it can copy Neos Fusion from the deck, and it's the last summon you can do, and Neos Fusion is the last summon you can do, so both of them are the last summon you can do anyway. So it's good for that. But yeah, definitely a very good card. And then also, it can protect your Elemental Hero, basically your Neos fusion monster by banishing itself, which is incredibly helpful. Alright, next we play 3 copies of Miracle Contact. This card, again, lets you cheat by... Basically, most Neos fusions are going to be contact fusions, but this will let you cheat because it lets you shuffle cards from your hand, field, and graveyard back into your deck, and then summon whatever you want to in terms of your, in terms of your Elemental Hero Neos monsters. It lets you basically cheat by shuffling away the materials into your deck. And then, yeah, it ignores summoning conditions, which is very good. Play 1 A Hero Lives for the Prisma. Playing 3 copies of Space Gift. This basically lets you draw a card for every neo-spacian on your side of the field. And because you can spam them now, you can actually draw like 3-4 cards, and it's very common to do that. You can also play Dark Ruler No More. It's actually very, very good in this deck because you can use Dark Ruler No More and then basically use one of your large Neoses to either shuffle it back into their extra deck or banish their entire field, but it's very, very, very good in this deck. But yeah, Space Gift is one of our draw cards. We also play 3 copies of Convert Contact. This is an insane draw card. Like, there's so many decks that if they had anything even remotely similar to this card, I mean, they wish they could have something like this. But basically, you send a Neo-Spacian from your deck and from your hand to the graveyard, and then draw 2 cards. Like, it has graveyard setup, draw power. Like, this card is insane. It's really, really good. We play 1 Contact Gate. This is a good grind game card. It's not something you want to see in your opening hand. Basically, you banish 2 of your Neo-Spacians from the graveyard and then special summon 2 Neo-Spacians from your deck, and then you're locked into fusions for the rest of the turn, which is, again, another one of those cards where in the past you're locked into fusions, you summon in that 1 extra monster zone, and now you can't do anything. But because you can summon anywhere in Master Rule 5, it doesn't really affect it negatively. But yeah, it's very good for that. And then basically, when a monster gets shuffled back into the extra deck, as all Neos monsters shuffle them, all Neos fusion monsters shuffle themselves back into the extra deck during the end phase. You can banish this from the graveyard and then target one of your banished Neo-Spacians and special summon it to your side of the field, basically for free. And of course, this card banishes the 2 Neo-Spacians for cost. It's the first effect it has, so you know you're going to have some. So it's good for that. We play 1 Super Poly because we're playing the Verde Anaconda, and I don't want to play 3. Just want to play the 1, but you can bump it up to 3. Next, we play Next, which is an insane card. Basically, this allows you to special summon any number of Neo-Spacians or Elemental Hero Neoses from your hand or graveyard in defense position, and all their effects are negated, which is irrelevant because you're going to fuse them away or contact fuse them away. So it does an incredible amount of just setup, and then for the rest of the turn you're locked into fusions, which doesn't matter anymore because, like I said, you can summon them anywhere. But basically, the craziest part about this card is if you control no cards, you can activate this from your hand. So this card and Convert Contact are just such a crazy card together. So you can activate Convert Contact, basically get rid of 2 Neo-Spacians, put them in the graveyard, activate Next, and then summon like 4 monsters. It's bananas. Seeing those 2 cards in your opening hand is just an incredible sight. And then to round it up, we play 3 copies of Impermanence, and this is, you know, your other hand trap. You play 6 hand traps in total. You have to interrupt your opponent. It's very difficult to play otherwise. Next, we play, for the extra deck, 1 copy of Cosmo Neos. He does a lot of stuff. Basically, on summon, whenever he's summoned, he prevents your opponent from activating any monster, any cards on the field. They can't use face-up effects, and on top of that, they can't respond to this card's activation. So when you summon it and it activates, and basically they can't activate anything, they can't respond to that activation of them not being able to activate. And then on top of that. When this card leaves the field, and not when it leaves the field, but when it shuffles itself back into the extra deck, just like all neo-spacians do, your opponent, it destroys all cards on the field, which is useful. Then we play 1 copy of Elemental Neos. This card, when it's summoned, you draw cards equal to the amount of cards that your opponent controls, which is, again, pretty nuts, because sometimes you can draw, like, 5-6 cards. It's really good. But on top of that, when this card leaves the field, you banish all other cards on the field, face down, too. So broken for that. Then we play 2 copies of Rainbow Neos. This card, like I said, traditionally was very difficult to summon, so they gave him crazy effects. But because of Neos fusion, you can basically summon him very, very easily. It's really not a problem. And his effects are nuts, because if you take a monster on your side of the field and send it to the graveyard, you can shuffle all monsters your opponent controls into the deck. Again, non-targeting, just shuffle. It's like the best way to get rid of things. And if you do that same thing with a spell, you can shuffle away all the spells. And if you send a card off the top of your deck to the graveyard, you can shuffle their whole graveyard back into their deck, which is like all the work that they did to have maybe graveyard setup. You can just get rid of. Yeah, but just really, really useful. Then we play 1 copy of Storm Neos. He's one of the older fusions, but he's still very useful. Like, when he leaves the field, you can shuffle everything away, which is pretty good. But yeah, and then on top of it, he has an ignition effect to just destroy all spell and trap cards. Which is just bananas. Then we play 1 copy of Dark Neos. These are the ones that are maybe a little less useful, because they're the 2-card ones, but you still want to play them. Yeah, one Dark Neos, 1 Aqua Neos, 1 Grand Neos. He's probably one of the more useful ones. You can activate him and then just shuffle a monster not targeting back into your opponent's extra deck. 1 Brave Neos. He's one of the somewhat newer ones. Basically, when he destroys a monster by battle, you get to search a Neos card. 1 Air Neos. Unfortunately, I don't have this card. It's quite expensive, and I didn't even know. But basically, I get most of my cards through my locals. Can't get them right now. You know why? But yeah, the Air Neos. He's very good for OTKs because, yeah, he gains attack equal to the difference in life points. And he is one that you definitely want to play, but he is a little bit pricey. He really needs a reprint. Then we play 1 Starving Venom for the Super Poly, 1 Diplex or Chimera for the Super Poly, 1 Ferocious Flame Swordsman. I actually think he's really good in the deck. He's a generic Link, and he's actually quite good in the deck, so you gotta run him. And next we play 2 copies of Predaplant Verte Anaconda. This card is insane. You just make sure that this is your last play. You already basically have probably summoned a Neos extra deck monster. Basically a Neos fusion monster, and then make this your last play, and you activate not Miracle Contact, you activate Verte Anaconda, pay 2,000 life points, send Neos fusion to the graveyard, and then you can summon like Rainbow Neos and just attack for a game. But it's super crazy. This card is one of the best cards to sort of come out for fusion decks, because it makes fusion decks that much better and that much more consistent. But that is basically it. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, subscribe.